The afternoon sun was beginning to dip when I walked through the side gate of my son's house. I'd brought a basket of apple pie and garden roses, his favorite since he was a boy. I hadn't told him I was coming. I thought it would be a small surprise. I hadn't seen him for weeks, and silence from him always meant he was overworked or upset with me again. The wooden gate creaked a little as I pushed it open, the sound swallowed by the faint rustle of wind moving through the trees. I remember thinking how quiet the place felt, almost too quiet for a Saturday, even the dog. Bruno, who usually barked his lungs out at strangers, didn't make a sound. Then I heard voices. They were faint at first, coming from the patio behind the hedge, my son's voice and another, a woman. I froze mid-step, my hand tightening on the handle of the basket. "It's taking too long," the woman said. Her tone was sharp, impatient. "You said she wouldn't last this long." My stomach dropped, and then came his voice, unmistakable, even when low. "My son Daniel, I know," he muttered, "but what can I do? She's stubborn. She won't just die." I couldn't breathe. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The world seemed to blur, the flowers trembling in my hands. I stepped back quietly, pressing myself against the wooden fence. "She's old. Daniel," the woman continued, "you're wasting money keeping her around. Think about it. Once she's gone, everything's yours, the house, the savings. We can finally start over." A brittle laugh followed hers. My son didn't respond. I waited for him to tell her off, to defend me, to say that she was wrong, that I was his mother, not some burden to erase. But silence stretched heavy and cruel. Then softly he said, "You're right." The basket nearly slipped from my hands. I remember the scent of the roses hitting me all at once, sickly sweet, making me nauseous. My legs felt like stone, but I stayed hidden, clutching the fence as though it could hold up what was left of me. "I just need to be patient," he continued. "She's fragile. One fall, one hospital trip, it'll happen soon. I'll handle it." I wanted to scream, to walk out there and demand what he meant. But something inside me, some small, terrified instinct, told me to stay quiet, to listen. "She'll visit soon," he added. "She always does. She can't help it. She still thinks I care." The words struck harder than anything else because they were true. I did still think he cared. The woman's voice softened. "Then let's hope her next visit is her last." They laughed together. I don't remember breathing after that. The garden around me seemed to fade away, the potted plants, the half-broken swing, the chair I'd painted for him last summer. Everything blurred into one awful realization. My son wanted me dead. I backed away slowly, the ground crunching under my shoes. I prayed they wouldn't hear. Every second felt stretched fragile, like the world could shatter if I made one wrong move. When I finally reached the gate, I didn't run. I couldn't. My heart was hammering, but my body moved on autopilot, one trembling step at a time until I was on the other side, out on the quiet street. I remember standing there, gripping the fence post, feeling the late afternoon breeze against my face. My son's laughter still echoed faintly from the yard, the sound twisting inside me like a knife. I walked home without looking back. The basket of roses and pie stayed behind on his porch, like a gift for a stranger I didn't know anymore. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the clock. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every tick felt like a reminder that I was living on borrowed time, not because of illness, but because my own flesh and blood wanted me gone. And yet I couldn't stop wondering why, what had changed. What had I done to turn the boy who once held my hand through every storm into the man who now whispered about my death the pie would have? He's still been warm when he found it. I wondered if he'd thrown it away or eaten it without a thought. As darkness settled outside, I made myself a promise. If my son truly wanted me gone, I needed to find out why before he found a way to make it happen. And that night, for the first time in my life, I locked every door and window. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when Daniel was the light of my life, my reason to wake up early, my excuse to stay strong after his father passed. He was only 12 when his father died. I still remember that night, the hospital hallway, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and Daniel's trembling hand clutching mine as if he knew the world had shifted beneath our feet. "It's just you and me now, Mom," he'd whispered. I'd nodded, promising him that no matter what, I'd take care of him, and I did. I worked double shifts at the library. I packed his lunches, stayed up to help him with homework, sat through his every football game. Even when I was bone tired, I saved every spare dollar for his college fund. My entire life became about making his life better. He used to tell me, "One day I'll buy you a big house, Mom. You won't have to worry about anything again." And I believed him. When he got his scholarship to university, I was the proudest woman alive. I remember crying in the car after dropping him off at the dorms, not because I was sad, but because I thought I'd done something right, that all those years of scraping by had finally meant something. The first few years he called often, every Sunday. Sometimes we'd talk for hours. He'd tell me about his classes, his friends, his dreams. He even came home every holiday, always with a bouquet or a little gift, a mug, a scarf, a keychain with my name on it. I kept every single one in a small box under my bed. But things began to change after he met her. Her name was Claire. I still remember the first time he brought her home. She was beautiful, sharp cheekbones, immaculate hair, the kind of woman who carried confidence like perfume. But there was something else, something I couldn't name. Then a glint in her eyes that made me uneasy. At dinner, she smiled too sweetly, complimented too often, and laughed at everything Daniel said. When I offered to serve more food, she declined, saying she was watching her figure. Then she asked if I planned to sell the house anytime soon, said it looked too big for just one person. Daniel laughed, brushing it off. I didn't. Later that night, when I asked him privately about her, he rolled his eyes. "Mom, don't start. Claire just likes to plan ahead." "Plan ahead for what?" I asked gently. "For our future," he said. "Our future." The words stung in ways I couldn't explain. I wanted to be happy for him, I truly did. But something about her presence felt invasive, like she was already rearranging the pieces of his life before he'd even decided where they belonged. Months passed, then years. The calls became shorter, visits less frequent. Claire started answering his phone. "Oh, Daniel's busy," she'd say, with a polite smile that somehow always sounded like a locked door. When they finally married, I wasn't even asked to help with the arrangements. I got an invitation in the mail, like a distant relative. At the wedding, Claire wore white lace and a smile that never reached her eyes. Daniel barely looked at me afterward. I'd tell myself it was just life, that children drift away, that love changes form. But little things began to gnaw at me. He stopped asking about my health, stopped visiting on my birthday. Once when I called because I was sick with the flu. Claire answered and said, "Oh, Daniel's busy. He can't come right now. You should rest." He didn't call back. A few months later, I learned from a neighbor that Daniel had been renovating his father's old workshop, the garage he and I used to clean together every summer. It was where his father taught him to fix bicycles, where they laughed, where we stored old family photos and boxes of his childhood toys. When I asked Daniel about it, his tone was distant. "It's just junk. Mom, I'm turning it into an feast." But it wasn't junk to me, it was memory. That was the first real argument we'd had in years. I told him he couldn't just erase the past like that. His father's tools, the photo albums, the shelves we built together, but he was firm, colder than I'd ever heard him. "It's my house now, Mom. You gave it to me, remember? You said it was a gift when I got married. I had, in my eagerness to see him settled, I'd transferred ownership of the property to him, never imagining it would one day become a wall between us. For the first time, I began to see the cracks, the small, silent ways he pulled away, how easily he forgot the things that once mattered. And every time I visited, Claire was there, her arm looped through his, her smile too sharp, her eyes too watchful. Once I overheard her whisper to him, "You'll never really move on until she's gone. She's always hovering, always reminding you of what was." He didn't know I was standing in the hallway when she said it. That night, I drove home in silence, the rain smearing the world outside my windshield. I told myself it was nothing, that she was jealous that Daniel was just caught between two people he cared about. I didn't want to believe my son could ever be cruel, but the distance kept growing. Last month, I'd sent him a card for his birthday. Inside, I wrote, "You'll always be my little boy. Love, Mom." He didn't reply. So when I decided to visit him that afternoon unannounced with apple pie and roses, I told myself it was just another attempt to reconnect, to bridge the silence. I didn't know that behind that wooden gate, I'd hear words that would burn through every memory I'd ever cherished. And now, as I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, those words replayed again and again, not just, "Why hasn't she died yet?" but everything that had led to it. The boy who once swore he'd protect me was gone, and in his place was a man who wanted my life to end, but I needed to understand why. And deep down, something told me the answer was buried in that house, in the one place Daniel had forbidden me to enter since the renovation, the garage. The night after I heard those words in Daniel's backyard, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every shadow in the corner looked like a whisper of betrayal. I kept replaying his voice calm, certain planning my end, as if it were a task on his list. By morning, the ache behind my eyes had become unbearable. I made tea, but the steam only reminded me of how steady my hands used to be. They trembled now with anger, confusion, and something far darker, curiosity. Because if my son truly wanted me gone, there had to be a reason, and something told me it was hidden in that house, the one I'd built, cleaned, and handed over to him like a fool. By sunset, I'd made up my mind. I was going back. I waited until dark, when I knew they'd be out. Friday nights were always their date nights. I'd seen their photos online before dinner tables, wine glasses, the same hollow smiles. So I dressed quietly, put on my old sweater, grabbed a flashlight, and slipped out the door. The streets were quiet, washed in that eerie amber glow of streetlights. Every step toward Daniel's house felt heavier, but I didn't turn back. When I reached the familiar wooden gate, my heart skipped. It was slightly open. Had they forgotten to close it, or had someone been there after me? I pushed gently the hinge, groaning like it was warning me not to. The backyard was still, except for the faint rustling of leaves. The patio lights were off, but a dim yellow glow seeped through the garage window. I hesitated. That light shouldn't have been on for years. Daniel had kept the garage locked. When I once asked why, he said, "Just storage, Mom, nothing you'd care about." But that night, standing in the silence, I realized I did care, because whatever was in there had changed my son into someone unrecognizable. The door was locked, of course, but I still remembered where the old spare key used to be, under the third flower pot beside the fence. Daniel probably thought I'd forgotten, but I never forget things like that, Em. Others don't. I found the key rusty and cold and slid it into the lock. It turned with a reluctant click. Inside, the air was thick with dust and oil, the kind of scent that carries years of memories. The room was darker than I expected, except for a single lamp flickering on a workbench. I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me. My flashlight beam swept across the room, metal shelves lined with labeled boxes, some old, some new. Tools hung neatly on hooks, but not the ones I remembered. These were newer, heavier power drills, wrenches, a chainsaw. I moved further in. The shelves looked too organized, not like Daniel's usual scattered mess. Every box had a label in neat handwriting: files, receipts, personal, medical. My heart thudded as I placed the flashlight on one box and slowly lifted the lid. Inside were papers, test results, and prescriptions, all with my name on them. Blood work, x-rays, insurance documents, even hospital notes from my last checkup. How did Daniel have these? I hadn't given them to him. Then I noticed something else, a small notebook tucked beneath the papers. The first few pages were filled with neat financial calculations, but as I turned further, my stomach twisted. There were notes about me: life insurance policy, renewed automatic beneficiary Daniel Hayes, hospital bills increasing. Doctor says condition stable. Need to find cause for acceleration, can't wait indefinitely. I froze. Acceleration. What did that mean? My hand shook as I flipped to the last page, written in quick, angry strokes. She trusts me completely, won't suspect a thing. The medication change will take time. The flashlight slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. I covered my mouth to stifle a scream. Medication, was he? No, that couldn't be possible. I backed away, my heart pounding, eyes darting across the garage as though the walls themselves were closing in. That's when I noticed the far corner where a large sheet hung from ceiling to floor, covering something tall and rectangular. I approached slowly, each step echoing like a heartbeat. The air behind the curtain felt colder. I reached up and pulled it aside. Behind it stood a tall metal cabinet, locked, but the key was still in the lock. I turned it. Inside, rows of small brown bottles lined the shelves, neatly labeled with medical stickers. Some had my doctor's name, others didn't. I picked one up and squinted at the faded text. It was a prescription drug, the same type I'd been taking for months, the ones Daniel insisted on collecting to save me the trouble. Only the dosage was wrong, much higher, dangerous. My knees nearly gave way. He hadn't been waiting for me to die naturally. He'd been helping it along, slowly, quietly. I stumbled back, the truth clawing its way through every memory. The sudden dizziness I'd been feeling, the fatigue, the blurred vision I'd blamed age, stress. But it wasn't that. It was him. I clutched the workbench for balance. My breath came in sharp gasps. That's when I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel outside. Footsteps. My heart stopped. I turned off the flashlight instantly and crouched behind the cabinet. The garage door creaked open. Did you forget to lock it? Claire's voice irritated. I told you I did lock it, Daniel replied. Maybe the latch slipped. Their footsteps came closer. My pulse hammered so loud I was sure they'd hear it. Claire sighed. You should move the files soon. If anyone ever finds... Relax. Daniel cut her off. No one's going to find out. She's not exactly nosy. He chuckled softly. Besides, she'll be gone soon. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. They didn't stay long. After a few minutes of checking the shelves, they left, locking the door behind them. I waited, counting to 60, then to 100 before moving again. My legs felt like water. I wanted to take the papers, the notebook, something. But all I could think of was getting out before they returned. When I finally slipped back through the gate into the night, the air felt heavier, thicker. I had proof now, proof that my son, the boy who once cried in my arms and promised to protect me, was planning my death. And though every instinct in me screamed to run, to hide, a colder thought took root in my chest. If he thought I was weak enough to die quietly, he didn't know me When I got home that night, I locked the doors again, though it felt pointless. The real danger wasn't outside anymore. It lived in the face I'd once loved most. I sat at the kitchen table for hours, the flashlight still in my hand, the smell of rust and dust clinging to me. My mind was a storm. The medical papers, the bottles, the notes about acceleration, every image tangled together until I couldn't tell memory from nightmare. At some point, I realized I was clutching something. A small folded envelope I must have grabbed by accident while escaping. It was yellowed, brittle around the edges. My husband's handwriting covered the front in blue ink. For Mary, if you ever find this. My heart stopped. I ran my fingers over the writing, tracing each shaky letter. He'd been gone almost 20 years. I hadn't seen his handwriting since the funeral, since the hospital. I stared at it for a long time before daring to open it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice, worn at the creases. The ink had faded in places, but the words were clear enough. Mary, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong, or you've found what? I couldn't bring myself to say aloud. It's about Daniel, about the things I've hidden from you. When Daniel was little, I took a loan. It was supposed to be small, temporary, for his schooling for us. But the man I borrowed from wasn't a banker. He was dangerous. The interest grew faster than I could pay, and by the time I realized the trap, it was too late. He wanted collateral, something that would ensure I never missed a payment. He asked for Daniel's future. I blinked, reading the line again. Not understanding, I didn't sign anything official, but I made promises I shouldn't have. I started working for him, moving money, signing false reports, helping hide what he didn't want found. And when I tried to stop, he threatened to destroy us. He said he'd make sure Daniel grew up believing I was a failure. A coward, that he'd poison him against me if I didn't obey. So I did what he asked for years, until the guilt became too much. My chest tightened, tears blurred the words. By the time you read this, I might be gone. I didn't die of illness. Mary, if they call it a heart attack, don't believe them. They'll make it look natural. But I've kept records, hidden things that could ruin them. They're in the garage, behind the second shelf, under the floorboards. Promise me something. If you ever find this, protect Daniel. If they get to him, they'll twist him. They'll make him see us as the enemy. He's a good boy, Mary. He just won't know what's real and what's been fed to him. I'm so sorry for what I've done. I thought I was saving him, but I might have only handed him to them. I love you always, Thomas. I sat frozen, staring at the paper through tears I hadn't even felt fall. Thomas hadn't just died. He'd been silenced, and somehow whoever he owed had reached Daniel. It made awful sense now. Daniel's sudden wealth, his detachment, the way he changed after meeting Claire. The house renovations, the secrecy, the medical records. It wasn't just greed, it was control. Someone was still pulling the strings. I unfolded the paper again, searching for anything I'd missed. At the very bottom, there was one more line written in smaller handwriting. If something happens to me, trust the man named Alan. He knows everything, Alan. The name hit like a whisper from the past. Alan Pierce, my husband's old friend, the one who used to visit when Daniel was little, a quiet man, kind but distant. He disappeared after the funeral. No one knew where he went. For the first time in hours, I felt a spark of purpose. I wasn't helpless anymore. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into a plastic sleeve, and placed it inside the old recipe box under my sink, the one Daniel would never think to touch. Then I pulled out the phone book from the drawer no one used them anymore, but I'd kept mine, a habit of an old librarian who didn't trust the internet. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages until I found it. Alan Pierce, 47 Brookside Lane. It was town. Not far. I hesitated, knocked twice, then again. No answer, Alan, I called softly. It's Mary Hayes, Thomas's wife. The door opened a few inches. An old man stood there, thinner than I remembered his hair. Gray eyes shadowed. Mary, he murmured, you shouldn't be here. He looked past me, scanning the street like he expected someone to be watching. Then he motioned for me to come inside. The air inside the house was stale heavy with the scent of old books and cigarette smoke. Stacks of papers cluttered the table, along with half-burned candles and a radio that buzzed faintly with static. I showed him the letter. He read it without a word, his face tightening with every line. When he finished, he set it down and said quietly, I told him not to leave you this burden. What burden? I asked. Alan sighed. Thomas got caught in something he couldn't escape, laundering money for a group that hides behind real estate companies. They made him a scapegoat when things went wrong. He was supposed to disappear quietly. When he didn't, they took care of it. My throat went dry, and Daniel Allen looked away. They used him. After Thomas died, they reached out under the guise of investment opportunities, promised him easy money mentorship, told him his father had failed him, that you were sitting on property and insurance that should have been his. They twisted everything. I felt sick. You knew. You could have warned me. I tried, he said bitterly. But when Thomas died, they watched me too. I went into hiding. He rubbed a hand over his face. If they know you've been snooping, Mary, you're in danger. I already am, I whispered. He's been changing my medication. Alan's eyes widened. You're sure? I nodded. I found the bottles in the garage, my records, my prescriptions. He went silent for a long time, then stood and walked to a drawer. He pulled out a small USB drive. Everything Thomas collected is on this. Transactions, names, proof. It's what they killed him for, if they. Neil's mixed up with them. This will show you how deep it goes. I took it, my fingers trembling. What do I do now? Leave town, Alan said firmly. Take that and go to the police. Don't confront him. Don't go back to the house. But I couldn't, because even after everything, he was still my son. I left Alan's house with the USB hidden inside my coat. I planned to go straight to the police. I even drove halfway there. But when I stopped at a red light, my phone rang. Daniel. My pulse spiked. I almost didn't answer. Mom, his voice came smooth, calm. Where are you? I hesitated. Just running errands. He paused. Really, I stopped by your place. You weren't home. I thought maybe you were sick. Every instinct screamed that he was fishing. I'm fine, I said. Just needed some air. Good, he replied after a beat, because I was thinking we should talk. There's something I've been meaning to tell you. The tone in his voice made my stomach twist. He didn't sound angry. He sounded rehearsed. Come by later, I said quickly. We'll have dinner. There was a faint chuckle on the other end. Sure, Mom. I'll bring dessert. When I hung up, my hands were slick with sweat. I drove home fast, heart hammering, the USB digging into my palm. I didn't know if he was watching, if Claire was following me, if someone had seen me at Alan's. All I knew was that I needed to hide the drive somewhere safe. But when I stepped through my front door, the first thing I noticed was wrong. The photo frame on the mantel, the one with Daniel as a child, was turned face down. Someone had been inside. Before I could react, a shadow moved in the hallway. Then his voice, calm, casual, drifted from the living room. Funny, Daniel said, stepping into view. I was just thinking of that picture. He looked perfectly at ease, hands in his pockets as if breaking into my house was normal. My voice cracked. What are you doing here? He smiled faintly. You said dinner, remember? I thought I'd come early. My eyes darted toward my bag, where the USB was hidden. You should have called first. He took a slow step closer. You've been busy, Mom, visiting old friends, poking around the garage. His tone sharpened. You shouldn't go. Through my things. My throat tightened. Those weren't your things, they were your father's. Something dark flickered in his eyes. That garage doesn't belong to you, he snapped. It's mine now. His voice carried the kind of arrogance only ignorance could fuel, or guilt. He took another step forward, lowering his tone. Whatever you think you found, you don't understand it. You're being manipulated. Alan's not who you think he is. I swallowed hard. Then explain it to me. He hesitated just for a moment, then laughed softly, shaking his head. You've always needed to know everything, haven't you? Always had to be in control. I didn't answer. I could feel the weight of the USB in my pocket like a ticking bomb. Daniel sighed, his voice almost gentle now. I'm trying to help you, Mom. You're not well. Those pills make you confused. You start imagining things. He was gaslighting me the same way his father had said those men would twist reality. I straightened my shoulders. I know what I heard. I know what I saw. For a moment, his face hardened, then smoothed into something colder, a mask. You shouldn't have gone in there. And then without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he looked back and said, If you really love me, Mom, stop digging. When the door closed, the silence that followed felt suffocating. I locked it behind him, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the keys. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Eyes, wide face, pale. He knew. He knew I'd been inside the garage. I rushed to my bedroom, pulled out the USB, and stared at it. I knew what Alan had said. Don't confront him. Go to the police, but I also knew Daniel wouldn't wait long before acting again. He wanted me quiet permanently. And if that was what he wanted, I'd have to move first. The rain started just after sunset, steady, cold, and rhythmic against the windows, the kind of rain that makes a house feel smaller, tighter like the walls are. Listening, I sat at the kitchen table, the USB plugged into my old laptop. Alan had been right there. It was all of it. A chain of transactions leading from Thomas's company to offshore accounts, and Daniel's name not once but dozens of times. Each document was another cut, property transfers, false loan signatures, and messages that made it clear my son wasn't a victim. He was helping them. By the time the last file loaded, tears blurred the screen. He'd been part of it, the money, the manipulation, maybe even the plan to get rid of me. I saved everything to a flash drive and hid it under the loose floorboard by the pantry. Then I turned off the laptop and waited. I didn't call the police, I didn't run, because for all his deceit, he was still my son, and I needed to see what kind of man he'd become with my own eyes. It was almost 10 p.m. when the headlights swept across the window. A car door slammed, then his knock, 3 slow, deliberate taps. I opened the door. Daniel stood there in the rain, his coat dripping, his face half shadowed by the porch light. Behind him, the night stretched dark and empty. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice even. I stepped aside wordlessly. He walked past me into the living room, pausing by the family photos. His gaze lingered on one, Thomas holding baby Daniel by the porch steps. "You kept all of these," he said softly. "They were never mine to throw away," I replied. He turned, studying me. His eyes looked tired, older. There was a strange calm in him now. The kind people find only after they've crossed a line they can't return from, Mom, he said. After a moment, "I didn't want things to turn out like this." I folded my arms. "Then why did they?" He exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "After Dad died, I was drowning in debt. The company you two left me wasn't what you thought. It was hollow, filled with bad contracts and dirty promises. Alan tried to fix it, but it was too late. Those people, the ones Dad worked, for they owned everything. The land, the houses, even the garage, and you thought joining them would save you." He gave a bitter laugh. "Save me, no. It was either that or they'd destroy everything with our name on it, including you. I stepped closer, so you lied to me. You made me sick. You made me think I was losing my mind." His eyes flinched. "That wasn't me. That was Claire." The name hit like a slap. Claire. He nodded. "She was never just my girlfriend. She worked for them, the ones who killed Dad. She said she could protect me if I played along. At first, it was just signing documents, small transfers, but then his voice broke. Then they asked for more." "What more?" He looked away. "They said you still had access to the insurance money, that if you handed it over quietly, they'd close the books, but you refused, so they told Claire to make you easier to handle." The room spun, Claire, the pills, the sudden dizziness, the way Daniel kept showing up just when I was too weak to stand. I felt cold all over. "And you let her." He clenched his jaw. "I didn't know at first. When I found out, it was already too late. She said if I told you the truth, they'd make it look like I killed Dad, or worse, that you did." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "So instead, you helped them finish what they started." He shook his head violently. "No, I tried to stop it. I told them you weren't a threat, that you were just grieving. But when you found that letter, everything changed. They panicked." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "You were never supposed to find it." I backed away, my hand brushing the countertop. "So what now? You'll what, silence me?" "Don't say that," he whispered. "Why not?" "You've already done everything else," my voice cracked. You think I don't see what you've become? You think I raised you for this? He slammed his hand against the table, eyes blazing. You think I wanted this? He shouted. You think I meant to become him? Silence fell like glass shattering him. Thomas, I stared at my son, the anger, the desperation, the guilt etched deep into his face, and for a fleeting second I didn't see Daniel anymore. I saw Thomas, the same look he wore the night he walked out and left me alone with our debts and promises. Daniel's voice softened. Every decision I made, I told myself it was to protect you. But somewhere along the line, I stopped recognizing who I was. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Then make it right, he hesitated. How help me expose them, you, me, Alan. We take everything to the police. End it. He stared at me like I just asked him to jump off a cliff. You don't understand. They'll kill us before we get there. Then we die trying, I said quietly. At least we'll die clean. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of the boy I used to know, the one who used to bring me tea when I had headaches, the one who used to promise he'd make me proud. He nodded slowly. Okay, but we have to move now. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his car keys. Claire's not stupid. If she thinks I've turned on her, she'll come for you first. I grabbed my purse, heart racing, then let's go. But before we could reach the door, a knock echoed soft, deliberate. Daniel froze. It's her. The doorknob twisted, the porch light flickered once, then went dark. Daniel, what do we do? He motioned for me to stay back, stepping toward the door with slow, cautious movements. His hand reached for the handle, but before he could touch it, the door burst open. Claire stood there, drenched, her blonde hair plastered to her face, mascara streaked by the rain. But her eyes were cold. Well, she said with a tight smile, looks like I interrupted family night. Daniel moved in front of me instinctively. Claire, don't do this. Oh, I think it's a little late for that, she murmured, pulling a small gun from her coat. Everything stopped, the air, the sound, even my heartbeat. She pointed the weapon not at him but at me. Hand it over, she said. The drive? Daniel's voice cracked. She doesn't have it. Claire tilted her head. You expect me to believe that? You think I didn't see her leaving Alan's house? My breath caught. Pshaw. He'd been watching. Claire took a step closer. Give it to me, Mary, and maybe I'll let you both walk out of here alive. For a long frozen second, I said nothing. Then slowly, I reached into my coat pocket and smiled faintly. I don't have it here, I said, but I can show you where it is. For the first time, silence filled the room. Not heavy, not hostile, but cleansing. The room was so still, I could hear the rain sliding down the windows like whispers. Claire's finger rested on the trigger, her eyes darting between me and Daniel. I could see the calculation behind them, every possible outcome running through her mind like a computer. Show me, she said at last. Her voice was low, cold, and final. Where is it? I forced a shaky breath. In the garage, behind the second shelf. Daniel stiffened, knowing I was lying, but I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Claire's lips curved in a smirk. Of course, that cursed garage. She motioned with the gun. Move, both of you. We walked through the rain, Daniel slightly ahead of me, the gravel crunching under our shoes. The beam from Claire's flashlight cut through the darkness, landing on the rusted garage door. Every inch of that place felt haunted by Thomas, by secrets, by every truth we'd buried to protect each other. Claire pushed Daniel forward. Open it. He hesitated, then grabbed the handle. The door screeched upward, loud enough to make the neighbors wonder, but none would come. Not tonight. The air inside was thick with the scent of oil and damp wood. The same shadows that had frightened me days ago stretched across the floor, like long, silent warnings. I stepped carefully toward the back shelf, pretending to tremble. It's here, I whispered. Pointing at the spot where the floorboard had been loose, Claire aimed the gun at my back. Keep going. Daniel's eyes met mine, a silent message, now or never. I crouched down slowly, pretending to reach under the shelf. My fingers brushed the cold concrete, and then the old flashlight I'd hidden earlier, I turned it on suddenly straight into Claire's eyes. The blinding light made her flinch and stumble. Daniel lunged. The gun fired. The sound was deafening, echoing through. The garage like thunder. I felt the air shift beside my face, close enough to feel the burn of it. Daniel tackled her, the gun clattering across the floor. She screamed, kicking, clawing her nails, tearing through his sleeve. They struggled, both soaked, both desperate, until finally Daniel slammed her arm down, wrenching the gun away. But before he could move, she reached for something else, a small knife hidden in her coat. I didn't think I grabbed the nearest thing, a metal wrench from the shelf, and swung. It hit the floor beside her, the clang echoing like a warning. Claire froze, her breath, ragged eyes darting between me and Daniel. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't make me." For the first time, I saw something crack behind her calm. Not fear, recognition. She looked at Daniel, her voice trembling. "You think they'll let you go after this? You think you can run?" He said nothing, just stared at her with that same mix of pity and rage. She laughed bitterly, blood running down her wrist. "You're your father's son, always cleaning up his messes." Daniel's hand tightened around the gun. For a second, I thought he might actually do it, but then he lowered it. "No," he said softly, "I'm not him." The sirens came before I even realized he'd called the police. The faint wail in the distance grew louder, closer. Claire heard it too. Her eyes went wide. "You called them," Daniel looked at me. "It's over." For a brief, terrible moment, I thought she'd try something, but instead she just sank to the floor, laughing softly. A sound that didn't belong in the human world. When the police arrived, she didn't resist. She just smiled at them as if she knew something we didn't, as if this was only the beginning. They took her away, her laughter fading into the rain. It was quiet after that, too quiet. The officers took our statements, the evidence, the files from Allen's drive. They promised to contact us once everything was verified, but I knew this wasn't just about Mo. Nay, it was about power, and the people behind Claire wouldn't vanish overnight. Still, for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. The house felt like a home again, not haunted, just tired. Daniel stayed for a few days, helping clean up the mess. We didn't talk much. Words seemed too fragile for everything that had happened. On the third night, I found him sitting on the porch steps staring out at the rain, the same rain that had started it all. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "You should hate me." I sat beside him. "Do you?" He frowned. "Hate you?" "Never then. Why do you think I would?" He turned his eyes red. "Because I became everything Dad feared." I reached for his hand, cold and trembling. "No, you stopped before it was too late. That's more than your father ever did." We sat there in silence, listening to the rain. Finally, he said, "What now?" Now I smiled faintly. "Now we start over. We live quietly. We tell the truth if anyone asks, and we never hide again." He nodded, though I could tell he didn't fully believe it. Neither did I. Because deep down, I knew the kind of people we'd crossed don't forget. They wait, they plan. But for that night, at least, I let myself believe the storm had passed. Weeks later, after the police closed the investigation, I went back to the garage one last time. The light from the doorway fell across the cracked floor. Everything was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner, the one Thomas had used for his tools. I crouched down and lifted the same floorboard again. Beneath it, wrapped in an old cloth, was something I hadn't seen before, a smaller envelope. The handwriting was the same. "Mary, if you're reading this, then Daniel has found the truth. And if he's still alive, that means you both have a chance. I know what they'll try to do, pit you against each other, twist love into fear, but love is stronger when it's tested. Don't forget that. When they come for you again, and they will, don't hide. Make them see who you are, not a victim, a survivor, Thomas." I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time, silence filled the room. Not heavy, not hostile, but clal. Sing outside, the morning sun cut through the clouds. The rain had finally stopped, and for once I didn't feel afraid to step into the light.